So it hit me. It bloody hit me. Where Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 is most likely to end off. Everyone's been wondering it. Some people have been guessing like the Junon boat crossing, which is super early. Others think it'll make it to that Aerith scene, which is super late. But I've got to say, man, I feel 90% certain where it's going to end and how it's going to tie in thematically into everything we've been speaking about through the previous theory videos, like the dream space theories, which weren't literally it's all a dream. And I just want to make this very clear. So many people think that I'm saying everything was just a dream in part 1 and Cloud's going to wake up. No, it was that the game was flirting with the concept of what dreams represent, where it's kind of inconsistent, biased events happening that are kind of from an individual's previous real world experience. Of course, Cloud and the gang, they're all getting like past memories and experiences transmitted through Aerith, as well as the intuitive ether. And that's why in that first part there were so many strange, just inconsistent, logic defying moments. And I've been saying that I think it would be really cool if every segment of this remake was sort of moving from one layer of deception and illusion and falsehood and ascending to like different stages of it, because that's kind of how like OG FF7 works. The gradients of mind fuckery are all very distinct and structured in a way that over an episodic format they could play it so beautifully. So where do I think part 2 will end? I'm just gonna say it straight up, it's still just a speculation, but Nibelheim's second visit, or technically first visit for Cloud and Tifa. Of course, what's most disturbing in this moment is the town isn't destroyed. It looks normal. All the people living there, the villagers, say that a fire never happened. A layout of falsehood. Which is exactly why the person I want to predominantly speak about, and I'll be teeing up in this video for another video because he deserves his own, is going to be Vincent Valentine. Vincent is for sure going to be one of the most important characters in this story. He has such a significant role that I can't help but think, compared to OG when he was just an optional character, one that wasn't actually going to make it into the final product, they almost cut Vincent. Even though they had all this like crazy story and involvement, like Vincent is the embodiment of chaos, created by the very planet, designed for when things become too negative and corrupt, terra corrupt in the live stream. His job is to end all life on the planet, pack it into Omega, who ships off across the cosmos to start life anew. That's pretty freaking significant, man. And of course his ties with Lucrecia being Sephiroth's mother. Cannot wait to talk about her more in the next video and a little bit in this. But this is why I think Nibelheim's second visit is the perfect place to end off FF7 Remake, because it just ties in with everything that Square Enix have been saying, that they want to try to do this in bite-sized chunks, get it out as soon as possible, and that doing in smaller parts may make it come out more efficiently. They've sort of said we don't think it's going to be a trilogy, or it may not be a trilogy, as we all kind of thought it would be. They compared it to the FF13 saga. But yeah, the second Nibelheim visit is where we meet Vincent. And I can't help but think the same as part 1 was we had Red a little bit at the end, but he was a non-playable character. I could see the same thing happening with Vincent. And why does it make sense? Well, because within the story, if Square Enix are trying to do this as efficiently and effectively as possible, well, Nibelheim's already pre-built, baby. Or a significant portion of the assets are, we see it in one of the earliest flashbacks, like a pan of Nibelheim village. Show a few bits here. There won't be much editing in this video because I'm lazy. We pan around the village, we see the whale flashback with Tifa and Cloud, we see loads of significant moments from the Nibelheim flashback, like Tifa with her father, other really key moments, and even when there was that hallucination when Midgar was burning, like there was that Nibelheim overlaying on top of Midgar, so much of Nibelheim has already been built. Which means all Square Enix really need to do, like if that asset is already there, they could get so easily to the second Nibelheim visit, when we actually visit on the map, because we would have to have Junon Crossing, Costa del Sol, which is just kind of like a fun town to stop off, Cosmo Canyon and Mount Coral, both of those. But other than those two, we're free to then hit Nibelheim. It's just before Sid Highwind comes, so we'd get Youth and Vincent. So if they can get those 3 or 4 other areas built, 4, Obviously, there's other places like the ranch, the Chocobo Ranch, but they're just small stop-offs. That would be amazing because that would open up the nightmare. The nightmare. The nightmare is what Nibelheim is described as being of the origins of. The nightmare being the nightmare of the FF7 story, the nightmare for a lot of characters as well. Vincent says it's where his nightmare began, it's where Lucrecia's began. Obviously the origins of Sephiroth and the Genova project as a whole. It's also where Cloud and Tifa's nightmare began. Like Vincent even says it, even the theme that is commonly associated with Nibelheim and indeed Vincent is called the Nightmare's Beginning. And the Nightmare's Beginning being the theme, so a nightmare being the theme of part 2 when dreams were part 1. Again, it's not a literal thing, but it's flirting thematically with it. Because think about it, part 1 was the planet trying to keep an original story on track, one that it knew it would survive. So it was trying to repeat a previous story. Well, that's what happens in dreams. You relive re-events of things and people and places you've already seen. And often what the difference between a dream and a nightmare is, I mean, you guys know it, is a dream is a positive experience. It's a wished for desire. The planet's being its survival. But of course, what happened in part 1, Sephiroth boo-cacked Destiny, cut a hole through it, pushed the team to the next level of deception illusion, one that is going to be of Sephiroth's creation, of his crafting. He controls destiny now. He can turn what was essentially the power of the dream of the planet into the nightmare of Sephiroth's will, of his great plan and design, which there's definitely got to be some differences in terms of what Sephiroth is after. Because indeed, there's enough evidence to show that this is like a post-Advent Children Sephiroth. And what we know from OG to Advent Children is Sephiroth's ambition really did escalate because it realistically began wanting to control the planet's live stream, the internal harmony, the balance. And we're going to be talking about this so much in this video, like this idea of polarity, negative and positive. In fact, the entire crux of the remake is centered on just this. Aerith told us in On the Way to a Smile. She found out that Sephiroth was turning the balance of the live stream overtly negative. So many souls with regret is a really big one we'll be covering in this video. Regret, anger, despair, spite, hate, all of these were seeping into the live stream, and Aerith was noticing it more and more, and she recognized the peril of it, and that she had to go back to warn Cloud, but she wanted to do it in a time and a place that he remembered her. Cue FF7 Remake. You know, they were writing On the Way to a Smile as a concept of the remake. So the fact that Aerith is now back in this story, she is kind of going along with, you know, the original story and how Cloud remembered her. And she's doing that because she wanted to find a way to try to reverse what Sephiroth was doing. And she actually wondered if Cloud could help her with it in some way. Her biggest worry is that she didn't want to manipulate him because he has a weak, frail heart. And she didn't want Cloud to be hurt by it. So we have the premise of where this remake is going. And when we look through Remake Part 1, it's all thematically there. The yellow flower, the purple flower, the dialogue between Sephiroth and Aerith. And I've spoken about how, you know, post-Advent Children, Sephiroth had weaved into the planet so much terra corrupt. Again, terra corrupt is just another name for negative live stream. He had weaved so much that now he was harvesting it. And there's so much evidence in part 1 to say that's happening. Again, Cloud's hallucinations are stronger. The failed clones are so much more effective at teleporting Sephiroth round. Cloud himself seems way more powerful. And even like the Geostigma goo falling off Genova. The notion that on this replaying time loop that's happening, just one way to describe it, the terra corrupt of the planet is far worse than it was in original. I really think that makes sense, and it's also why I think Square Enix have weaved in a lot of the new stuff into the remake. One of the really big ones that stands out to me is Hojo. So if like all these characters are learning from their past experiences in this kind of semi-illusionary, dreamlike state where wished for desires are playing out. So it's not just the planet, I've covered it, you know, like Tifa saving Cloud was a wished for desire. Kate Sith showing up at the pillar, that was a wished for desire. Barrett getting President Shinra to like announce his crimes. Chadley, a robot having free will. Yeah, that whole thing of wished for desires and dreams transitioning into nightmares. Well, who would recognize that transition? And this is where Hojo's the research has really been coming into my mind. My theory of Hojo's theory is that he is noticing that the S cells, the capabilities of it, that there's new frontiers opening up in front of him. And of course, one of the biggest pieces of evidence for that is the bridge scene. The bridge scene that was emphasized in the Ultimania, that the developers pointed to a few times. One where when Sephiroth first appears to Cloud and it really like psychologically trips him out. That trip out from Cloud was what made Sephiroth visibly tangible for the first time to Tifa and the others. Ooh, so Cloud's emotional state amplified Sephiroth's power. Of course it does. Jenova, what does Jenova feed its power from as a parasite? Darkness, negative energy, terra corrupt, geostigma, whatever you want to call it. So the notion that the more powerful that is, that's why Sephiroth got more empowered in that moment. And they even emphasized, underlined it with Hojo witnessing it. He actually witnessed it. He made a comment that one of his hypotheses was proven correct. And I know that in OG, the hypothesis is of the reunion theory, that all Jenova cells will naturally try to congregate and come back to each other. But I actually think it's a bit further than that. The cackling laughter that we see at the end of Hojo realizing something, the fact that he makes the group go through the drum this time, that happens, and that he's collecting data from Cloud the entire way that he's going through. I think it's because through that recording, Hojo witnessed firsthand that Cloud's negative energy had a direct effect on the Jenova cells. I think Hojo's experiments will be changing across the remake because the nature of the Jenova cells have essentially changed from this re-happening. And that's why perhaps we could assume he's thinking about trying to merge S cells, Jenova cells with Aerith. No, he's trying to, well, he thought about breeding her with an S or G type soldier, and even like the S and G type experiments. We saw Deep Ground, we saw the creature with two bony wings, protrusions, which really makes it seem like he's even been combining those. Hojo's trying to create something, and he's recognizing the way that Jenova cells work and how they empower themselves. And yeah, really, what is that? So I've got so many notes to go through. What makes a suitable Jenova host? Well, I think it is pretty much a correlation that the acuteness of the person suffering is a direct reflection of how powerful they are with Jenova cells. And there's so much proof of it. Before I go into that, I just want to bring this Advent Children Vincent line. This is super curious.
The stigma. It's a symptom of alien matter infesting the body. The body tries to eliminate it and overcompensates. Inside our bodies is a current, like the lifestream. That current is what fights off any malevolent intruders.
An internal life stream. A life stream that is as affected by the balance of negativity and positivity, that can become corrupted. That also exists within the body, the same as it does on a planetary scale. In fact, this is what I love about FF7, is it focuses on that notion of balance and harmony, not just on a planetary scale, not even just on a microcosmic scale, even a macrocosmic scale. Dirge Cerberus, Vincent is chaos. His job is that when things become too overtly negative on the planet, he eradicates life, and then Omega joins those souls back to the macrocosmic. Like literally, there is something called a cosmos life stream. So we have the macrocosmic, the planetary, and the microcosmic. And why this is so significant to think of it this way, to look at everything again from the eyes of Vincent, it makes so much sense as to why all of the individuals who were most affected or most empowered by Jenova cells were the ones who had the darkest emotions. So here are my examples. Denzel, in Advent Children, he had geostigma. He'd lost his I was gonna say parents, it was actually his grandmother, and he was super tripped out from that. And Marlene doesn't. Marlene had a pure internal life stream condition, so she remained unaffected by it. I could also say it's why Kadaj was the most powerful of the remnants. Kadaj in Advent Children, he expresses the most jealousy of Sephiroth. Now this one is a huge one, I can't wait to talk about it, but Lucrecia Crescent, yeah, she also had Jenova cells, and in one of the lines she says that the Jenova cells had made her borderline immortal. And Lucrecia, of course, was someone with severe regrets, dark emotions, a terrible, terrible, tragic story. and it made her borderline immortal. And then there's the obvious ones, like Sephiroth. Sephiroth is of course the ultimate host, but perhaps even Cloud surpasses Sephiroth. Like, have we ever thought that the reason why Cloud might be more powerful than Sephiroth and could do all these crazy shit, especially in Advent Children? Like, what happened with Cloud in Advent Children? He was at his darkest moment. His emotions were the most astray, and it was in those moments that he was most powerful. So have we ever thought that perhaps the reason Cloud can beat Sephiroth is only when his emotions become more suffering than even Sephiroth's? Ooh, that's angsty. It's angsty. I don't want to say that the only reason Cloud is powerful is because of his emo-ness. I don't think it's just that. Of course, Cloud, he derives a lot of his strength from his friends, his friendships. There's nothing in this world he doesn't cover in relish or cherish. But we can't deny the fact that most of his power is derived from this Jenova infusion in his body, which is essentially a parasite of negative energy. And I think even Zack kind of proves this point. Like, think about it, Zack got Jenova cells implanted into him, but unlike many other soldiers who also had SLs who were merged with this Jenova type experiment, many of them died, many of them failed, but Zack walked it off like it was nothing. He bust out of a tank, he wrecked up a load of soldiers protecting Cloud, like, he was so unaffected. And could that be because Zack is such a positive guy? His internal life stream, his internal current is geared towards the positive, and because of that, does Jenova have nothing to feed off of within Zack Fair himself? That's a cool way to consider it. And equipped with this new lens of consideration, and let's look back over some significant remake moments. Because what is Sephiroth trying to do the whole game? Of course, he's trying to make Cloud give in to rage and hate and take the bait. And we see significant moments, when like Sephiroth does his douchey little creepy smirk. Like Sephiroth always seems so pleased when Cloud gives into those moments. Why? Because Sephiroth knows it is tightening Jenova's grip over him, and by proxy, Sephiroth's as well. And that's why the teammates in FF7 are so important. No, not just for Cloud, but also for each other, because they are there to guide each other and sometimes call each other out on actions that will corrupt their own internal life stream. Like even if the actions seem justified, Barrett is a great example. He thinks that sacrifices need to be made for a greater good, for anything to change, and Tifa has to call him out on that. Call him out that while it's okay to think that there's sacrifices to make a better world, what happens when that person who was sacrificed was that person's entire world? Because Tifa knows that pain. And that's the thing, like even Barrett has to go off in Advent Children and atone for his sins. Because those actions they cause a blight on the soul. Even that's why like Jesse and Dean are trapped in the life stream on the way to a smile, because they have become overtly negative. Their internal life stream has separated them and kept them individualized. They can't move on. They can't be diffused. And Aerith has to therapize. Therapy comes into the equation that I did in the previous video. But even moments like Cloud, like look at the moments that he was gonna execute Reno. Even if Reno was the enemy and might have deserved it, Aerith had to stop him. The same with Marco. In a moment of confusion, he killed Tifa, had to stop him. Like even freaking poor Johnny. Cloud was willing to execute Johnny, like a bloke on his knees, blindfolded, just because he was a squealer. A squealer! Cloud, that is so goddamn dark. And again, he has to be stopped. No, because murder, person or situation deserving will always, be a blight on the individual's soul. And that's why Aerith, she does a lot in the remake. Protecting Cloud, guiding Cloud, like all those moments, even when like she pulls Cloud back and like shakes her head at him. I can really see those moments when I look through Vincent's lens of internal live streams. Those were moments where Aerith was pulling Cloud back from hurting himself, corrupting himself. Because by him fighting Sephiroth, he would actually be empowering him. And there's so many other moments, and this is why I love Aerith so freaking much, because it's not even just that, it's moments where she can take even like tense, dire, life or death situations, like even the Corneo arena. Corneo. Like she turns that really like heated moment that could be really bad for Cloud And she bases it around something positive. Teamwork. You know, the high five that they kept doing? Yeah, man. Like she was turning a bad situation into something good, something that wouldn't linger on Cloud. But as much as I'm crediting Aerith, I'm also going to credit Tifa, probably as she is the most cornerstone. She is the rock, the pillar that keeps Cloud from going into the abyss. Like, she's done it so many times for that guy. Like, literally been the hand that's held Cloud falling into the metaphorical abyss. Oh, that's nice. And I kind of get that this may be sounding like a very elaborate way of basically describing the power of friendship, aka some Kingdom Hearts bullshit. But it really is that, as in it is a literal, tangible power. If we take the internal live streams idea that Vincent gave to us, because so much hinges on that. A person keeping their soul clean. In fact, I made a little list. These are all the things that having a positive or negative internal state determines in FSN Universe. So it's things like whether you'll linger in the live stream, whether you'll be able to move on peacefully, whether you will stay individualized, whether you contract the geostigma, the strength you gain from Genova cells that we've already covered, even the color wing that you will acquire, white or black. To this date, the only explanation we've had on those wings from Square Enix is they've said that those wings is an unexplained mechanic, but that it's based on the person's spiritual condition, essentially. So it will depend on the color of the wing, and it will even decide whether you will exist post-holy. Oh yeah, I know that escalated quickly, but yeah, when the detail of holy from Bugenhagen is the planet will only keep around things that are considered positive. Now, Bugenhagen wasn't sure which humanity would be. Like, life or death, afterlife, salvation really does hinge on this very notion of how dark or light a person's soul becomes. Another one I'll quickly add on, it's a bit questionable though, whether you can enter the promised land. I think so. And I think one of the strongest emotions we can definitely point to in FF7 that will cause that imbalance. Like, what is the seed that leads to sin? You know, the sins that Lucrecia said she made, the sins that Vincent said he makes, even the sin that Sephiroth tries to expose in his most mindfuckery moment in Nibelheim, yes, the place of the nightmare. It's regret. Regret leads to sin, and sin corrupts the internal balance, and that's what causes the person's internal world experience to become a nightmare. And why is it specifically regret? Well, of course, Vincent stayed in a box for 20 years because of freaking regret. Lucrecia is crystallized alive to this day. Man, are they going to decrystallize her in FSM Remake? She is such a wild card for Square Enix to play, Lucrecia. They're definitely using her. Being Sephiroth's mother is wild. But yeah, it was regret. The moment I was talking about, where the nightmare begins, Nibelheim, in OGFF7, when Sephiroth is most trying to break Cloud. And again, this is why I don't think it's just my opinion that Tifa is the bedrock of keeping Cloud's salvation, the salvation of his soul, intact. I think Sephiroth knows it too. Because in one of the most mindfuckery moments, what is Sephiroth trying to do in this scene? He's trying to corrupt Cloud against Tifa by exposing the lie that Tifa was holding this entire time, which she regrets. She regrets keeping the lie. That's what brings this entire situation to its head. Also, of course, regret of Aerith's death is what brings it to a head in Advent Children. But yeah, Sephiroth's trying to manipulate this moment. Like, he even goes as far as to get the picture to show that Cloud wasn't in it, to prove that Tifa was lying, to prove that Cloud's identity wasn't what he thought it was. Again, falsehood, deception, illusion, nightmare. Regret is what fuels the nightmare. And again, I wrote a few more examples of this, and it's mostly to do with Lucrecia now. So we'll start moving towards Lucrecia and Vincent. This will tee up my second video. The reason why Lucrecia doesn't get with Vincent is because of Grimoire Valentine, that Vincent's father. Now, who was Grimoire? He was someone who was researching Chaos and Omega, like these ancient myths. And it was in Nibelheim that this research was happening, this research into chaos. A creature of nightmare, a creature of darkness that is essentially the ultimate harbinger for when the live stream becomes too negative. Is it any wonder that Grimoire, who started off as a decent father, suddenly devolved into a bad dad. He started raising Vincent severely, teaching him how to use guns. He was absent a lot, something that, again, Grimoire regrets and asks Lucrecia to tell Vincent he's sorry. After having regrets about that, Lucrecia avoids Vincent and she goes with Hojo. What a ridiculous decision. Like, all of these are ridiculous decisions that seem kind of out of character. And I think it's the madness of Nibelheim. I think that's where they could really take the remake, because that place, it fucks with people's heads. Vincent knows it. That's why, when they see him in the coffin, he says, this is where your nightmares will begin. Like, what if they play it as like this cursed thing that is like unavoidable? It drove Sephiroth to madness. It drove Grimoire to obsession. It drove Lucrecia into Hojo's arms and even to experiment on her unborn child. Vincent, who is very much a man of action, even kind of out of characteristic, did nothing. He just watched it happen, and that led to his regret, his nightmare. This all centers around chaos, and it just kind of happens naturally with chaos. Whereas with Sephiroth, he kind of has to plan it. He has to actually go out and pull off his stunts and his maneuvers and his manipulations and his grand schemes. And that's why Vincent is so key to this story, because for as powerful as Sephiroth is going to become, with all the terra corrupt and the negative souls, the more that Sephiroth does it to empower himself, by default, he will empower chaos more and more. And we'll talk about this more in the next video, but Vincent's ability to control chaos. There is the proto-material, which is the key point of what allows Vincent to do it, but there's way more to it. Vincent's own emotions, his own emotional states, again, the friends who teach him the lessons that they teach him and the values and the goodness that he sees in them, that actually helps him to control chaos. We see moments where the proto-materia is removed and Vincent actually manages to control chaos. So Vincent's internal life stream, again, has that kind of interplay, that interconnectedness into the story. And that's the thing with that entity within Vincent. I think that's why, when he says to Cloud in Advent Children about the internal life stream, I think that's actually how Vincent sees the world. Like, he can see corruption, he is drawn to it. Is it any surprise that Vincent suddenly always appears, is the first one to appear, like at the Advent Children Lost City? Vincent appears to save Cloud. He travels the world a lot, and that's why I really love Cloud and Vincent's relationship, because Cloud always asks him about what's happening. Vincent was one of the first ones to go to where Kadaj, Loz, and Yazoo spawned in the Northern Crater. Hence, he saved Song and Eleanor. Now, what was the thing that Vincent really enforced to us happened? They tortured the shit out of Song and Eleanor. Like, the Japanese version of Advent Children, I watched it, they go into it way hard. Like, they emphasize it so much, like, they tortured them real bad. So is it like the darkness of the remnants and the torture of those two? Is that how Vincent navigates his way to these situations? Like, he got to the Northern Crater. Cloud often always asks Vincent these questions and he answers them, and he says oh, you're so well informed. Even the start of Dirge of Cerberus, a battle starts in a town that Vincent just happens to be that at. Do you see what I mean? It's like wherever Vincent goes, chaos follows him, or he naturally follows chaos. And that's why I think he can really see the internal life stream, the corruptness of an individual. And that's why I've started looking at regret as like this tangible, palpable thing. Like not just an emotion constrained to an individual. But I really think FF7 has kind of blown it up, not onto those microcosmic, macrocosmic, and planetary scales, but even things like intergenerational suffering and regret. like generationally being passed down, where children can inherit it from their parents. I started thinking like that, and it made sense. Like think about like Cloud's mum, Claudia. Her regret probably is that she doesn't have a stable husband. Like, Cloud's dad isn't there, and is that why she's always bothering him about getting a girlfriend, one who's mature, who will look after him? Like, is she projecting her regret of not having that partner onto Cloud? And is that what throughout the entire series is why freaking Cloud is just, he seems so against having an intimate relationship? I could throttle Cloud at times. The way he shits on Tifa, like, there's a real block there for Cloud. Did he inherit it somewhat from Claudia? There's some better examples. Goddo's regret over subjugating Wutai. definitely passes on to Yuffie. That's why she becomes so obsessed with the freedom and liberation of Wutai. That's why she's going and getting the materia. Sephiroth gaining his dark emotions from Hojo and Lucrecia. Do we even need to cover that? The regret passing down, already covered. Grimoire passing it down to Vincent. Veiled in the story, he was the leader of the Turks. He had an awful lot of regret for his daughter, who was Elf, who became an extremist avalanche fighter. The leader of it. The Turks and Avalanche are like polar opposites, and a father and a daughter become heads of both. Is it generational? A quick one many of you might not know is from On the Way to a Smile, and some characters are in the remake for this. There was a character called Evan Townsend, the half-brother of Rufus Shinra. His mother Annette also worked in Nibelheim, the source of the nightmare. She becomes essentially a failed clone, dies. Evan then basically spends his life obsessed trying to investigate what happened to his mother. President Shinra passing it on to Rufus, which, if that's the case, that makes this such a cool alternative way to view like the sour smirk that Rufus had at the end. I've covered other reasons for that, but that could be one cool way. Then very quickly, Seto infected Nanaki, like the shame of Seto and the falsehood, because it was a lie essentially, that Seto was a coward. That made Nanaki regretful that Seto was his father until that gets cleared up, and that helps Nanaki move on. A really big one is the broken and depressed Gillian Hewley, who plays such a dark story in Crisis Core, and it definitely plays a role in breaking Angeal. Both shows these, and yeah, so there are some examples of where it could be passed generationally, and I don't think it's a ridiculous idea, especially when, like, what are the Cetra? The Cetra were basically no different to humans. It was just before humans had settled down, before they'd found home. Which, that settling down, Sephiroth would describe that as a sin of neglecting their duty as caretakers of the planet. But Marlene would say it was all she's ever known.
Are they gonna destroy the bar? Are they gonna destroy our house?
Okay, it was an excuse to play that Marlene scene again. It's so freaking squee. Yeah, that's all Marlene's ever known, and like the importance of home being emphasized so much. Like, does it seem fair that for that settling down, for that love of home, that humans have been cut off from communicating to the planet, like the Cetra can? They've even been cut off from like the promised land. It's like the very salvation of humans have been compromised because of what their ancestors did so far back. So do you know what I mean? So it's like that passed down generationally and literally changed the Cetra into humans, lost their powers, disconnected them from it. And that's why I really think FSM Remake has to be about like that rejoining, to refuse that connection between planet and human. That's what Advent Children was definitely so much about. That's what Marlene is there to represent. Marlene is one of the first humans, in my opinion, being reconnected back to Cetra source and Cetra powers, and that's why there's that Aerith and Marlene relationship, and they made Marlene look so much like Aerith in every single way. It's all to essentially undo that original sin. So the notion that the sins of the father become the sins of the child is definitely present in FF7. And when I say sin, I just want to say I'm not talking about like it in the biblical sense. There's some great deity, shouting moral codes down to everyone that we have to follow. I think sin in FF7 is two things predominantly. Sin against another individual, so causing harm or unto another. But more importantly, I think it's sin against sin is where you do something that's harmful to yourself. Something that unbalances your own internal harmony and lifestream, and that predominantly does always source back in regretful action. And ultimately that's what I see Sephiroth's goal going into part 2 is going to be, is to craft this story where basically the group think that they now have free will, that they're no longer constrained by destiny and that they have free choice. But ultimately Sephiroth is going to be pulling the strings so that it lands so much harder when Aerith dies again, when Cloud can't succeed, and that through that regret, Sephiroth is hoping that Cloud commits sin And that sin disrupts Cloud's internal harmony, that tips him towards the negative, that empowers Jenova more, tightens the grip, and is how Sephiroth will be able to get Cloud's strength. Lend me your strength. And that's why it makes so much sense for this second part to push to that second Nibelheim incident, to introduce that layer of deception, that layer of falsehood that was in OG, as well as the theme of the nightmare beginning. Because that's how Sephiroth is going to empower himself. The more regret he can sow into the planet, they'll become souls that will empower him rather than ones that will side with Aerith. That's why Jenova stands to gain so much from every lost soul. But that's why I think Vincent ending it would be so huge, because Vincent is the counter. As powerful as Jenova and Sephiroth are, and even characters like Nero was literally the embodiment of darkness, but what did Nero find? He had no effect on Vincent. For as powerful as they become when the planet becomes more negative, so too does Vincent. He will definitely be the most equipped at being able to recognize and guide. I think that's why he will have a role in the nightmare, even more powerful than Aerith did. Because I really like that line at the bridge, when Sephiroth says to Aerith, those with clouded eyes only see shadows. He thinks that Aerith is clouded by the planet and the planet's influence, and that she can't see the inherent power that lies in darkness. But Vincent doesn't have those blind eyes. Vincent is just that fucking powerful, and if Sephiroth plans to corrupt the planet as a whole, he's gonna have to deal with Vincent, because at some point Vincent does lose control. He can only contain it up to a point before he will chaos the fuck out, and I can't wait to see how they tie that in with Sephiroth. I can't wait to see what redemption they might do for Lucrecia Crescent. There's even the point there, like does Sephiroth actually know he has all this knowledge of the past, from coming back? Does he even know his origins yet? Does he know of his real mother Lucrecia? Does he really care? Other themes that would really play into this, like the darkness amplifying, is like the Wu-Tai War. The remake is like re-firing the Wu-Tai War. We don't know why, we don't know who's really pulling the strings behind it, but obviously what does war bring? It brings a shitload of suffering, pain, death, and hate and spite onto the planet, which is going to empower that negative balance again. So the Wu-Tai is a really close one to watch for. Is that everything I wanted to cover from my notes? I think it is. I just wanted to tee this up as a lubrication to the Vincent video that's coming. Like, to start thinking about nightmare, think about sin, negative life stream. Like, all of these themes that could be so predominant. So if you want to see that Vincent video, give me a subscribe. Make sure you hit that belly button. It's such an annoying fucking second thing to have to do. but do it if you want to be seeing them vids. And I really do hope Square Enix do something like this for part 2, because it would be so tight. It'd be so tight, because at the end of the highway scene, what did Aerith say we were moving into? We're moving into boundless, terrifying freedom. That's what an optimist like Aerith would call it. But what would an entity who walks the shadows, who understands the darkness, what would they call it? It would be chaos. 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 Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye.
Fireworks to light up your night sky. In a flash, life and love can go awry. Let me take you higher. Fulfill your desires. It's the